I never thought my Thursday lunch break would be featured on the evening news. That's exactly what happened last week. All I wanted was a quiet lunch at Rosie's Diner, my favorite neighborhood spot where I'd been eating twice a week for nearly 3 years. The moment I pushed through those familiar glass doors wearing my red MAGA hat, I felt the atmosphere change. I wasn't trying to make any kind of statement. It was just a hat I had picked up on the way out the door. But to one woman who was sitting by the window, might as well have been a call to arms. I had just gotten myself into my favorite corner booth and ordered when I heard the scrape of chair legs on tile. A blonde highlighted bob, designer's sunglasses perched on her head, middle-aged woman abruptly stood up from her table. Her face was also taking on a scary shade of red as she pointed directly at me. "Excuse me. That hat is promoting hate in this restaurant," she shouted, her voice cutting through the lunchtime crowd. "You're violating public decency." The entire restaurant fell silent, forks halted midway to mouths. The only sound was the soft music playing overhead as 30 pairs of eyes darted between and this suddenly enraged stranger. I recognized her vaguely, not personally, but as a type, the kind of person who feels entitled to control every environment she enters. I had seen her giving the teen hostess a hard time about not being able to get a window seat even though she came in without a reservation in the middle of the lunch rush. The poor kid had attempted to explain that all of the window seats were reserved for the next hour. But this woman, this Karen, had still demanded to speak to a manager. Apparently, she'd settled on a regular table, but her simmering irritation had discovered a fresh target. Me. I'm not a confrontation kind of person. I'm an accountant, for crying out loud. I do my days amidst spreadsheets and tax forms, not in public drama. "Ma'am," I said calmly, "I simply want to eat lunch. I don't want to bother anybody." But Karen wasn't having it. She pushed her chair back and marched over to my table, designer handbag swaying from her elbow, finger extended like a weapon. The other customers watched with that humiliating mix of fascination and secondhand embarrassment that public disputes always seem to inspire. "You need to take off that disgusting hat right now or leave this establishment," she ordered, her voice increasing in volume with each consecutive word. "You don't have the right to spout hate while people are trying to—" I took a deep breath, reminded myself that reacting would make the situation worse, and responded as quietly as I could. "Understand you don't like my hat, but I have the same right to wear it. I'm not bothering anyone, just trying to eat my lunch like the other individuals here." This logical response seemed to infuriate her all the more. She looked around the restaurant as if she thought everyone would stand up and crusade. When no one did, she turned back to me with narrowed eyes. "That hat is everything that is wrong with this country. You're a menace to this community." By now, several people had already reached for their phones, expecting that whatever was about to happen might be worth videotape. "I know the owner of this restaurant," Karen, although I doubted this assertion. "I'll have this restaurant shut down for allowing hateware in a family restaurant." The situation went from bad to worse when Melissa, my regular waitress, appeared with a nervous expression. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your table. You're disturbing our other customers." Karen rounded on her, obviously delighted to have a fresh victim. "Are you kidding? You're defending this? I want to speak to your manager immediately." Melissa, who I knew was working her way through nursing school, remained calm impeccably. "I'll get the manager for you, but meanwhile, please return to your table." Karen did not return to her table. She pulled out her phone and started recording hands of the restaurant. I want everyone to see what kind of establishment this is. They have hate people sitting here and threatening others. I hadn't threatened anyone. And the absurdity of her statement might have been funny if it wasn't so frightening. People began to shift in their seats. A family with young children asked for their check. The manager, Dave, emerged from the back, wiping his hands on a towel. I spoke to him many times over the years and knew him as a fair-minded guy who treated everyone the same. "Ma'am, I understand that there's an issue, but I'm going to need you to lower your voice and not record other shoppers without their permission." "It's store policy," he said, his voice firm but courteous. Karen held her phone in Dave's direction, narrating now as if she was reporting live. "The manager is now trying to silence me for speaking out about hate. This is America, and I have freedom of speech." What she did next was a game changer. As Dave tried to tell him that freedom of speech did not encompass the right to interrupt a private business, Karen's outrage reached the boiling point. She turned around once more to my table and, with what appeared to be intent, swept her arm across the table, knocking over my glass of water, which was full to the brim. Ice cubes slid across the table as water spilled onto my lap and the floor. "Oops," she said with a smirk that was quickly erased when she realized how many phones were now recording her actions. The restaurant had completely transformed from a quiet lunch spot to what was now feeling like a courtroom of public opinion, and the verdict wasn't looking good for Karen. One old man at a table nearby stood up. "Young lady, that wasn't necessary at all." "This man hasn't done anything to you." Someone else chimed in, "Care what hat a person is wearing." "You don't assault people?" Karen's face was reddening as she watched her story get away from. "You're all brainwashed. You see what's going on in our..." Dave's patience had run out. "Ma'am, I must ask you to leave the premises right now. I've been courteous, but you've disrupted our business and assaulted a customer's." Eyes widened in disbelief. "Attacked? I barely touched his water. It's him who should be thrown out." Dave shook his head. "I'll call the police if you don't leave." Karen's face turned to one of Victor. "Call them. I was going to do that myself. They need to address the real problem." She waved her hand dismissively in my direction, clearly thinking that the police would see things her way. When 2 police officers arrived some 10 minutes later, Karen was still standing at my table, having refused either to return to her own table or to leave the restaurant. By now, she'd managed to get herself so upset that she didn't seem to notice the unimpressed expressions on the officers' faces as they surveyed the scene. A few customers immediately handed over their recordings of the incident, which were viewed by the officers then and there. I simply remained seated, still somewhat in shock that my quiet lunch had turned into this spectacle. "Ma'am, we need to ask you to step outside with us," one of the officers told Karen. Her vengeful grin faltered. "Are you going to arrest him?" she asked, nodding in my direction again. The officer shook his head. "No, ma'am. We need to speak with you regarding disturbing the peace and harassment." Karen's mouth fell open. "Harassment? I'm trying to protect." "That hat represents violence." The second officer let out a sigh. "Ma'am, regardless of your politics, don't interfere with a business and harass customers. Come along now." What I witnessed next was something I never imagined seeing. Karen, now abruptly realizing that things were not going her way, crossed her arms and planted her feet. "I have freedom of speech. This is discrimination." A warning tone crept into the first officer's voice. "Ma'am, you're welcome to your opinions, but not to insert yourself into a private business. This is your last chance to come willing." As Karen attempted to turn away, muttering something about phoning her lawyer, the officer took her arm firmly but gently. Karen shook him off with surprising strength, nearly toppling into another table. "Don't touch me. This is assault." That was the final straw. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for disorderly conduct, harassment, and resisting an officer," came the official declaration as handcuffs were produced. The restaurant, which had been watching in stunned silence, broke into scattered applause as Karen was escorted out, still loudly proclaiming that she was the real victim and that she was only trying to save society from destructive influences. The irony appeared to be lost on her. As the police car pulled away, Dave arrived at my table with a fresh glass of water and a complimentary slice of apple pie. "On the house," he said, smiling regretfully. "Been serving folks here for 15 years and never seen anything quite like that." Other customers stopped by my table to give me their support, whether or not they approved of what my hat represented. "Doesn't matter what side you're on," said a woman wearing a purple sweater. "No one deserves to get treated like that when they're trying to eat their lunch." The theatrics didn't end there. By evening, videos of the altercation had gone viral, appearing on a number of social media websites and even earning a brief mention on the local news. Comments were all over the map, as might be expected, though most seem to agree that the politics of personal life do not justify harassment, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on. The strangest twist came 3 days later when I received a call from a blocked number. It was a reporter who informed me that Karen had been identified from the video. It turned out she was a real estate agent at a prestigious firm, and her employers proceeded to place her on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The charges against Karen were quite serious. The district attorney decided to make an example of her case, as there was clear video and multiple witness accounts. She was arraigned and charged with disorderly conduct, harassment, and resisting arrest. The judge fined her $2,000 and sentenced her to 40 hours of community service and 6 months probation. As the sentence was delivered, Karen's carefully built facade cracked completely at last. "This is outrageous," she yelled in court, being severely warned about contempt of court. Her face crumpled as the reality of her situation finally started to break through to her.